So an inclusion classroom should not be a place where there isn't a flight plan if you're flying the plane. The inclusion classroom should be where the pilot and the co-pilot, if that's a co-teacher or a paraprofessional, we're prepared. We know where to navigate because we have that student's IEP or 504 plan. We did a learner profile. The book is big on learner profiles. Get to know strengths, interests, communications.
All right, welcome back, Aspire Leaders. I'm so excited for my guest today as she's a phenomenal educator, author, consultant, specializing in inclusion education. And I have the wonderful and phenomenal Toby Karten with me. Toby, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you, wonderful and phenomenal Joshua Stamper, for having me on Aspire to Lead. It's my pleasure to collaborate with you and our listeners here today on our inclusive journey.
Yeah, for sure. I want to show everyone that's watching on YouTube your beautiful book here, Admire, Framework for Inclusion. And this is going to be kind of our baseline for today in our conversation. I'm super excited to dive in further. But before we do that, Toby, will you just share a little bit about yourself, your educational leadership journey?
Absolutely. How much time do we have, Joshua? No. Since I was young, I wanted to be a teacher, and helping others is something that is an important part of our profession. And whether you are a special ed teacher, a gen ed teacher, a special ed administrator, a gen ed administrator, a coach, we are a paraprofessional, we lead each other and we aspire each other to lead ourselves in good directions that help our students who sometimes don't get it right the first time to do things in a different way without too much jargon that confuses everyone on their journey. So my background in special ed was before inclusive practices were the norm. And thankfully today you find people don't say as much, that kid doesn't belong. They say, how can we help that student to succeed within the gen ed classroom, which mirrors life? So that's been my lifelong goal as a professional. I myself have worked as a teacher, a coach, a supervisor, an adjunct professor, and as you said, an author. And I love spreading the word. So let's keep doing that in this podcast.
Very important topic. And so I want to know about the behind the scenes of the book. So what was it that you saw a need in, and why did you take so much time to build out such a beautiful project?
Thank you so much. And for that synopsis of the book, it's a framework. Yeah. And a lot of times, you could buy a frame from Target or Walmart, wherever you're shopping, right? And everyone can buy the same frame, but you put it in your house, it doesn't look the same because the inside is different, right? And that's what it is with inclusion. Everyone's looking, so tell me how I do this. It's not like I'm making a recipe for chili and I need a certain amount. I'm sorry, I had to say that. It's still cold here in New Jersey.
That's right, Colorado too.
Yeah, right. I just came from Arizona, 90 degrees. I'm thinking, what was I thinking coming back here? But anyhow, what we need to say is that it's not a blanket, that one size fits all, one size, and I say this several times, it frustrates all in the sense that not everybody is the same. Not everybody has the same interest, profile, prior knowledge. So that goes for teachers, it goes for students, it goes for families, it goes for admin who might be new at this or maybe with a different type of staff. It's not always what we need to teach, it's how we're teaching it. And that was the motivation for writing this book under the acronym ADMIRE, which stands for assess and activate, decide and delineate, model and monitor, instruct and involve, reflect and revise, and to think about how we expand and enrich at the same time. And that's something that we don't stay stagnant. Because a student is able to do consonant blends, we don't stop there and we teach multisyllabic syllables, but we do it step by step. And that's what this framework is attempting to do with the action verbs under that acronym ADMIRE, to get people to see that it's not so difficult. And we have to understand perspectives and have patience and a plan. And that's basically what this book is about. It's a plan to have a way for students to succeed in inclusion classrooms.
Yeah, I want to touch on the inclusive classroom piece because I think it's a word that's used often, but I think that some folks have different definitions of what that looks like. And so for you and the work that you've done for so many years, what are some common misconceptions with that inclusive environment?
Yeah, that's a tough question these days in terms of the word inclusion itself. There are no separate lines if I'm going to the supermarket to buy things if I had an IEP, hopefully. So that is the premise behind inclusion. People debate whether is it inclusion classroom or inclusive classroom. I've had several publishers ask that. It has to do with the classroom being prepared. And it's an inclusion classroom if the student is proactively set up for success. And that happens when we know the do's, don'ts, and do betters. And that's an important thing to keep in mind with inclusion, is that the formula for it will vary depending upon the needs of the child. So what is an inclusion classroom? There is no stigmatization. You don't say, hey, Mrs. Karten's here. Will her kids go with her to the back of the room? Because then you have the self-contained classroom within the gen ed classroom. What you want to try to do is to make it inclusive so everyone has that sense of belonging and contribution on different levels. I may have difficulty solving algebraic equations, but hey, I'm a great artist. And we have to draw a math picture of this. I'm on it. Why not have someone who loves music create a song about the American Revolution and the freedoms our country has? That would be a lovely thing to demonstrate knowledge. It doesn't have to be a multiple choice test. So an inclusion classroom should not be a place where there isn't a flight plan if you're flying the plane. The inclusion classroom should be where the pilot and the co-pilot, if that's a co-teacher or a paraprofessional, we're prepared. We know where to navigate because we have that student's IEP or 504 plan. We did a learner profile. The book is big on learner profiles. Get to know strengths, interests, communications of students. So then you could say, okay, you are a kinesthetic learner, tactile, right? I'm going to write the letters with glitter glue. Or you like to move, we're going to have a kinesthetic debate instead of the fake errand for the kid with ADHD. So an inclusion classroom is a blank canvas that is created depending upon the student's needs, the family's communications, observations, and data. And data doesn't have to be just standardized tests. It's a lot of communication with academics, behavior, emotions, social issues to then decide what services and supports have to be front loaded into that inclusion classroom. Because I'll tell you what it's not, Josh. It's not physical inclusion alone. Being in that classroom, you're in an inclusion classroom. I could tell everyone I am, but if I'm feeling I can't ask a question or I'm not learning, that's not an inclusion classroom. And that just doesn't go for the kids with IEPs. It goes for the students on higher levels who need to be challenged. We need to challenge all learners. And there's the framework for Admire gives ways to do that without overwhelming everyone through different avenues of approaching to learning.
Yeah, I love that. So we're talking about overwhelming, and I want to talk about real quick a mental performance shot that I've been taking for quite some time. I think this is for everyone. This is for administrators. This is for paraprofessionals, especially education teachers, like we're talking about. I know that, used the plane metaphor earlier, and specifically as a leader, I know for myself, I felt like I was crashing the plane because I was not taking care of myself. My daily routine was out of whack and I was running out of energy. I wasn't reducing my stress. I didn't have very good habits. And for myself, and within the last couple of years, folks who have listened to the show know that I have changed that with Magic Mind. And so real quick, I just want to talk about just this wonderful mental performance shot. I've added this to my daily routine, and it's changed everything because it's reduced my stress. It's got all natural ingredients. It's given me a boost, especially like midday. I typically crash. There's a ton of information out there. One big thing that I used before was caffeine, just trying to have as much caffeine. And caffeine doesn't actually give you energy. It blocks your neuroreceptors in your brain, which is something that I didn't really realize. And so that's why you get tired. And so, after a drink, I might have like a cup of coffee 1 to 3 hours later, I'm experiencing a sudden drop off in my energy. And that's typically called a caffeine crash. And so for me, I wanted to find something that was going to give me energy in a natural way. And that's where this comes from. Magic Mind has a beautiful formula that provides safe and effective stress reducing ingredients. It gives a sense of calmness. And of course, it lifts your mood. And so you can get up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase when you go to the link. And I'm going to have it on the screen for those who are watching on YouTube. It's magicmind.com/ATLLT20. And that's at your checkout. And you can actually put in the code during your checkout process. And the code is just the same as the end of the website, which is ATLLT20. And again, that's going to get you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off of your one-time purchase. It's a phenomenal mental performance shot. I'm extremely confident that you're going to love the instant effects, the all-natural ingredients, the taste, and how it's going to make you feel moving on with your day. All right, Toby, I want to go back to what we were discussing before. I know just over my time as an administrator, I was a paraprofessional when I first started, and just being in that environment. And sometimes what I saw was a lot of fear. I have a lot of different abilities within the classroom, and I know with that fear comes anxiety. And so I'm just curious for you, working with teachers, what are some practical tools or strategies that they can use to accommodate a wide range of those student abilities?
Yeah, and I have a chapter in the book. It's actually right on target there because it's called inclusion anxiety.
Yeah.
And that goes for the teachers, it goes for the students, it goes for the families. And some little bit of anxiety might be helpful according to brain research, right? But too much thwarts you from reaching that path. And a lot of times teachers will say things, and I watch the kids because I do a lot of coaching notes for teachers on campuses now. And I'll watch the kids looking around to see if anyone else is looking at them, to see if they understand, or when the teacher asks any questions and that nobody raises their hand, it's not because they understand it. It's because they don't want to look different in front of their peers. The same thing when someone is a gen ed teacher and maybe they have a student in their class with emotional difference and they never worked with a student like that before, they could get anxious. Am I doing the right thing? But that's when we leverage collaboration. Veteran teachers need to help teachers who would just pre-serve as teachers. I work with teachers of all skill sets when I was on campuses full-time as an inclusion support teacher. And I always wanted to do one thing first, and that's to establish relationships. Relationships are crucial. It's okay if you don't know something and have anxiety about that, be a student, a teacher, an admin, but don't hide it or not communicate it. So if I don't know how to teach that algebra lesson, I'm not going to get in front of the class and do that, but I might watch a Sal Khan video, or I might say to you, hey, you've been doing this for 12 years. You mind giving me a quick tutorial on it? And you coach each other the same way, whereas maybe I have expertise on how to scaffold or to break it up step by step. I would then do that part of it. And then maybe we would learn from each other and interchange roles. And I think that that's a very valuable thing. We want to, as a coach, I always say, I invite you to do this. So teachers don't feel that this is a have to and it creates anxiety, but they walk in and they're prepared. And that's a great feeling to know that not only are they prepared, but they're supported by the administration. And leaders who are not looking for results in 5 minutes know that this takes time to see results, be it the end of the unit, be it 6 weeks. And if those results are not what we anticipated, we change the strategy because it's not appropriate. And I think it's important that together we define what that word appropriate means for this student in this environment, in this grade, with this subject. Sounds complicated, but it's really a fun thing to do, and especially if you collaborate with others.
Oh, that collaboration piece is huge. And then also, what you were saying before with relationships and how key
Yes.
that is. So I want to tie those two things together. So, for our teachers working with our students, how can they build and strengthen that relationship, not only with the students, but what you were talking about earlier with their families to create a more supportive learning environment for all?
Yeah, let me give you a couple of examples. One is storytelling. Be real, be authentic. I just did a professional development on a campus, and I was talking about cause and effect. So I can't believe I'm saying this on your podcast, but my computer screen cracked, which I shared with you last week. And here I had to go fly somewhere, but luckily Apple came out with new computers, desktop, just the timing was perfect. But the cause for that happening and the effect was I ate more chocolate. So that wasn't helping, but I told that story to the group and they kind of liked it. And the effect was I got on the scale. So the effect was I made a salad and I got a new computer. So you become real. You become personal. You become part of who they are. And I think that that's an important part of it. Establishing relationships with students can be done in formal or informal ways. Emotional check-ins. You're writing about a subject. You send, the book has a few of these interest inventories. So if you're reading on a 4th grade level, you might go to Common Lit or ReadWorks or one of those lovely sites, New ZLA, and you might pick a story about panda bears because the student loves panda bears. I just did the same workshop where I showed a virtual calming room, and during the whole workshop, the person was one virtual calming room, which was a zoo at a tiger. And she was upset that she couldn't see the tiger. Well, she took my email and 3 days later, she told me she found the tiger, but she also asked me for resources for kids with autism. Why? Because I let her look for her tiger, and that was an important thing to do. And even now, when we establish relationships, we don't have to agree with each other all the time, but we have to have communication in our relationships. We have to have trust, and we have to have respect for each other, that I don't have all the answers. You have a new idea. Hey, maybe we'll make what we do better in that sense, and being open to coaching. I am an inclusion facilitator and a coach, but I learn from the people on my campuses all the time. We establish relationships. Kids who think nobody cares about them, and a lot of our students don't have perfect homes as well, undergoing trauma and circumstances they can't control, and a lot of anxiety. And we could be that one safe person. Research says this, caring adults make a difference in students' lives. And that's something that I cannot be put down in any way, shape, or form, is be human, with your kids.
All right. So the Admire framework that you've got, this book is phenomenal. It's got a ton of activities and forms and things that you can fill out there. There's also, strategies that are built in also throughout the book. And I'm curious, what is the other end of it as far as you working with students in classrooms, campuses, districts? I know you do work all over the country. So I wonder, what is the end product when people are starting to put in the Admire inclusion framework?
Right. They're doing planning. They're planning and prep. I just, to this activity, I love it. Hey, maybe we could do an activity with everyone now if they're willing. They have
Sure.
All they need is some kind of writing implement, right? And paper, and write the word active. And if you write the word active, think about that word active. Do you want to add the prefix pro or re or in? Do you want to be inactive and the kids come in the class and you're not prepared or knowing? Do you want to be reactive? Because sometimes, I just did a pickleball lesson the other day. If I'm reactive and I don't have a plan of getting into the kitchen, I'm not going to do well because I have to have that proactive stance, right? And being proactive is much better than being reactive. And that's something that I hope that people are willing to do, that we're not going to say, I'm teaching this lesson and this is my lesson, but I'm teaching this lesson kind of what that MTSS framework, multi-tiered system of support. I know there's going to be a group that gets it right away. I know there's going to be a group, or maybe we, if you're working with someone else, is going to, need a little bit of scaffolding. And there's someone, a few kids that don't have that prior knowledge. So the first thing in the ADMIRE framework is assess and activate prior knowledge. So if you know ahead of time, whether it's a pre-test or a unit test or a Google form or informal questions, however you want to work that out, you a Kahoot, Blockit, lots of cool ways to do it. You get to know what's ahead of time, so you have additional scaffolding. You have a strategy table in your room with graphic organizers set up with the WH questions, or you have a site online like Visionary where they could go to pictures, or they have access to certain tools that they might need, whether it's read aloud or knowing how to use the dictionary tools or the thesaurus if they need to do that as well. So when you're proactive, you're realizing that the classroom is set up for difference. And that's an inclusion classroom. It's not saying the kids are here now, they're not getting it. What are we going to do? Oh, the kids know more. Turn to the next page. Well, the next page is inappropriate. It's a different unit. So I have project-based learning. There are centers set up. There are norms. And that's very big in inclusion classrooms. And I mentioned that in ADMIRE, that norms are set up, that not everyone's doing the same thing at the same time. And that's okay. And I kind of think of it as like a whole part, whole setup. We're together as a whole part, maybe as the intro. We break up into units, different parts, and we come back together as a whole.
Well, Toby, I didn't know that I should have had in your bio Pickleball Pro.
Oh, geez, no. Those were beginner lessons,
Gotcha.
but I have to give a shout out to our instructor. He's wonderful. He's teaching
right.
us.
You got to do some scaffolding there too, right?
Yeah. You know why I like it? Because we're educators and we want to know the why. And any of the strategies, it's research-based. So he's giving me the rationale for moving up, I like that.
Yes, very applicable for everyone doing different activities too. But I want to move on over to some of the things that you're doing. I know you're speaking at the ASCD-ISTE-Leverage collaboration for GE and SE coaches and collaborators in June. So will you just share a little bit about what you're speaking on?
Sure, I'd love to. The conference is in San Antonio, lovely place. And it is just full of energy, of educators sharing knowledge, collaborating, smiling, learning. And my session, Leveraging Collaboration, is an important one for SE coaches, coordinators, GE coaches, coordinators, and how we not only do things, but how we say things to each other, communication, language, how we respect each other, trust each other, and how we reach each other. And that is going to maximize our effectiveness and how we set that course to navigate that road. The journey, and part of this book, the subtitle is Pave the Way for Students of All Abilities. But there are bumpy roads. There are challenges. So ahead of time, like I have a slide, what if scenarios. And these what if scenarios are not what if, because they're real scenarios that either myself or the people I've been coaching experience. They're going to happen. And what are we going to do? And part of that relationship with leaders is we want to take care of others, but we want to take care of ourselves too. So that's important to manage as well within the session. So I am so looking forward to working with a great group of people in that very interactive session. And yes, I make people do things in the session. I think it's important. You know, John Dewey says we need to move, learn.
Yes.
We learn by doing, right?
For sure. No, I'm the same way. If I'm doing a keynote, you better know that you're getting up and you're talking with other people and moving and getting interactive. So I love that so much.
There are some people that are not kinesthetic, so I do give options. So I don't want to make those people who but it's not going to be sit and get, because that's not the classroom. I think
giving them a little anxiety prior to the session.
We need to model, right?
Yes.
So that's what we try to do sometimes.
Of course, yeah. And you do. I mean, anyone that's listening to you right now knows that that's how you're going to approach it. So I'm going to have the link for the conference for folks that are interested in joining Toby and her wonderful session out in San Antonio. Love that town, especially for conferences. It's a beautiful space. So make sure that you're heading over to that link to learn more. I'm also going to have some more publication pieces from Toby also, so you can take a look at that. In addition to her book, I'll have the link in the show notes for everyone and on joshtamber.com. Please make sure that you're grabbing this resource. It is phenomenal. I continue to show it on the screen because I have it personally. I know that this is something that, I could bring to any campus and they can implement it right away. It's not going to be overpowering or too much for them on their plate. It's something that they can implement right away with ease. So with that, Toby, will you just share a little bit of advice for our aspiring and current leaders? And, if there's something they can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
What I would recommend first and foremost is to smile. Smile at the person in the mirror. Smile at the people you work with. There's a lot of hoops in education these days, special education, and it is something that is non-negotiable, that when we learn, we need to experience happiness to make it stick to us. Kids remember that, and adults remember that, and everyone has, as you mentioned earlier, that anxiety. And the first and foremost thing you can do is understand that everyone is going to succeed at different times, at different levels. And the important part is to have patience, especially with students who don't learn the same way. And as leaders, we sometimes work with people with different personalities as well. And I have learned to understand many people's perspectives. I might not agree with the perspective, but I think it's that person's right to have that perspective. So, even when I was a teacher and I didn't like the perspective of my administrator, what did I do? I put a research article in the mailbox. Sometimes and they knew it was from me, right? But I needed to understand that we need to find research-based ways to implement these practices in the classroom while smiling.
No, it's so true. And yeah, you're 100% correct. There's a lot of folks that we interact with on a daily basis, regardless of your position in education. So yeah, I love that advice. Real quick, Toby, I know you've got a podcast, you've got a YouTube channel, you've got a lot of different social media links. So of course, I've been flashing up your website, which is inclusionworkshops.com. So make sure folks are heading over there. But if there's a social media app that you would like folks to follow you in or direct them to, which one would you like them to follow you in?
They could have their druthers. Facebook. I'm starting to do more Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a few different things. You got to remember, Josh, I grew up with Etch-a-Sketch as my technology, but I'm learning to embrace a lot of these things. And I do love my Kick podcast if they'd like to listen. I speak to people I've made along the journey who have their stories, and we have our stories. And I think a lot of people could learn from other people's experiences. And that's called leveraging collaboration as well, just as we're doing now.
Awesome. Yeah. So of course, I'll have all those links in the show notes on joshtamber.com. And of course, for those who are watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description for you. So make sure that you're clicking on those links, following everything that Toby's doing, posting all of her resources, tap into that, make sure that you're grabbing the book. I'm going to show it on screen for the last time here. as our conversation's coming to an end. But yeah, the Admire framework for inclusion, positive strategies that pave the way for students of all abilities. And it's a fantastic resource. Make sure that you're grabbing that as soon as possible. With that, Toby, I know you said Etch-a-Sketch, but you're doing a phenomenal job on all the different social media platforms. You're very active, obviously speaking, consulting, and helping so many educators around the world. And I just appreciate all the work that you're doing with this very, very important topic.
And could I just say thank you to everyone in the education profession for doing what you do too. And thank you, Josh, for this opportunity to speak to people.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.